Coming up, a complete look at colonial America in Liberty Square at the Magic Kingdom. Disney presents
Beyond the Kingdoms. Happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome to this week's main show of Beyond the Kingdoms. I'm your host, David, and today I'm continuing the Exploring Magic Kingdom series with a look at Liberty Square. If you're new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and click on the bell icon so that you never miss an episode. But let's take a trip back in time to the 1700s at the birth of the United States of America. Liberty Square is perhaps the most underrated land of the Magic Kingdom, and it's the smallest. If you're a history buff, I strongly encourage you to take some extra time here on your next visit to the park. There is a tremendous amount of detail packed into this little corner of the park. The land features some stellar shops that I always make a point to visit and browse the merchandise. Liberty Square is also home to some unique dining, in that its table service restaurant offers a Thanksgiving feast all year round. This is also the second place in Disney World to meet up with your favorite pals from the Muppets. And of course, Liberty Square is home to my personal favorite of all the classic Disney attractions, the Haunted Mansion. Altogether, this land features 2 shops, 3 dining locations, 1 major form of entertainment, and 3 attractions. As I discussed in my Exploring Frontierland episode, this section of Magic Kingdom is unique in that an architectural story sprawls between 2 lands, both Frontierland and Liberty Square. America's historical timeline can be walked starting from the Haunted Mansion, which pays homage to revival Gothic architecture found in New England, then traveling to America's westward expansion in the 1800s in Frontierland. Therefore, Liberty Square is firmly set in the 1700s. But the timeline continues in smaller increments throughout this specific land. Next time you walk past the buildings here, check out the numbers on the doors. They are said to represent a specific decade within the 18th century. But Liberty Square is a fictional town loosely inspired by Philadelphia in the mid-1700s, and dozens of historical landmarks are recreated here, starting with the Liberty Tree. Smack in the middle of the square, you'll find a giant southern live oak tree. This tree is meant to represent the first Liberty Tree found in Boston, Massachusetts. The original, located near Boston Common, was a large elm tree and dedicated in 1765. And it was where the Sons of Liberty would hold political meetings. It is said that they also hung lanterns on the tree, which is where Disney pulled its inspiration to hang 13 lanterns on the oak found in Liberty Square, each one representing the original 13 colonies. Other small details dotted around the land are inspired by great literature. Next time you pass by the circular building on the outside of the Hall of Presidents, look up to find the window with 2 lanterns lit. These props are inspired by Henry Longfellow's classic poem, Paul Revere's Ride. The lanterns are placed here in response to the famous line in the poem that reads 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, where Paul Revere explains to light 1 lantern if the British are approaching by land, and 2 if they are approaching by sea. But the most iconic symbol of colonial America represented here is the Liberty Bell. This replica was created by a cast mold of the original bell found in Philadelphia. The original was made in London and shipped to Philadelphia to be placed at the top of Independence Hall, which still stands today and is also recreated here at Magic Kingdom and serves as the exterior of the Hall of Presidents. The original bell cracked on the first test ring, but that is not the famous crack we see today. After the failed test run, the bell was melted down by some locals and recreated once again. There is actually no record of when the famous crack now found on the bell actually broke open. It is believed that the crack slowly developed through time. But in 1846, the crack was widened by some metal workers to stop the crack from growing even larger. So, the opening we see today on this historical landmark is actually the result of a repair job. And the recreated one here at Disney is located just a few steps away from the tree and is surrounded by the 13 state flags that were the original 13 colonies as well. Now, if you've been following this series, you know that I like to highlight a piece of literature that is represented in each land of the Magic Kingdom. Some lands, such as Fantasyland, is clearly inspired by dozens of fairy tales. Other lands, like Adventureland, get an entire attraction inspired by a famous story. But here in Liberty Square, the literary inspirations are small, but it is tied to a legendary spooky tale. Sleepy Hollow Refreshments pays homage to the legend of Sleepy Hollow, written by Washington Irving and published in 1820. The story is set in the 1700s, hence its appearance here in Liberty Square, and it takes place in Tarrytown, New York. Now, according to legend, a Hessian lost his head in battle sometime during the Revolutionary War, but his spirit lives on, and on some nights he can be found charging through the town in search of his head. The classic story of the Headless Horseman was later adapted by Disney in the 1949 animated film The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which is actually a two-part film, one half retelling the story of The Wind in the Willows, and the other the story of Ichabod and his adventures into Sleepy Hollow. The same animated character of the Headless Horseman drawn for the film can be found at the top of the menu board at Sleepy Hollow Refreshments. We sadly don't get an entire attraction inspired by the film, but fans of the story should definitely catch a glimpse of the Headless Horseman during the Magic Kingdom's Halloween party. He can be seen at the start of the Boo to You parade, which starts in Frontierland, carries on through this exact section of Liberty Square, before charging down Main Street. And while we don't get an entire ride featuring the Headless Horseman, the land's main spooky attraction is perhaps the biggest draw into Liberty Square, and that is the Haunted Mansion. I find that the Haunted Mansion is the best of all the classic Disney rides, mainly because it is the most collaborative attraction worked on by Disney Imagineers, and that is due to the timing of Walt's death. As I mentioned in the Exploring Adventureland episode, the final attraction to be completely overseen and signed off by Walt before he died was Pirates of the Caribbean, over in Disneyland. At that same time, a haunted house attraction was in the early stages of development. And there was debate as to whether the attraction should be more scary or family friendly. In the end, because Walt wasn't around to sign off on the final idea, the ride is a fantastic combination of both. And many famous Imagineers have their specific style embedded in this ride. From Mark Davis's comical characters to Raleigh Crump's Museum of the Weird. But the most iconic Imagineer signature in this attraction for me is the ride's theme song. I remember hearing it on an old Disney World record when I was a little kid. Grin Grinning Ghost was written by the genius Imagineer Francis Xavier Atencio, also known as X Atencio. He was responsible for writing the attraction's script and lyrics to the iconic song. But he began his career at Disney, like many Imagineers, as an animator. He worked in animation from 1938 to 1965, on titles such as Fantasia and the Mickey Mouse Club. His first job in Imagineering involved contributions to the Disneyland Railroad Primeval World diorama, and the first two major ride scripts he worked on were Pirates of the Caribbean and Adventures Through Inner Space. But his most iconic piece of script writing was certainly the Haunted Mansion. And not only does his voice come through metaphorically through the words in the script, but they can also be heard literally. Next time you ride, listen to the voice coming from the coffin in the conservatory scene. Atencio lent his voice to record this specific piece of dialogue. But that's enough talk about history and details. Let's look at the practical side of Liberty Square. The latest addition to this land is Magic Kingdom's newest show, Great Moments in History, featuring the Muppets. This is a cross between Streetmosphere and a stage show, featuring some lovable characters. There is actually two different versions of this show. One retelling the story of Paul Revere's Midnight Ride, and the other about the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But instead of this being a rather serious look at America's history, it's a comical one, featuring Kermit, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, Fozzie, and my personal favorite, Sam the Eagle. The two different shows rotate throughout the day, and there are usually 4 performances of each, for a grand total of 8 performance times each day, between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. This is a great show to see, and since everyone pops out of the windows high up on the second floor of the buildings, there's no bad place to stand and watch. Dining is another underrated aspect of this land. Now, I'll soon be posting my 5 must-have snacks video in Liberty Square, which will include some brand new offerings found in this area of the park. This land has some of the best park snack locations now. But let's look at Liberty Square's restaurants. First up, we have Columbia Harbor House. This quick service location pays homage to the sailing ship Columbia, which can be found over at Disneyland in California. The Columbia in Disneyland sails through the rivers of America, just like the Riverboat, and it's a replica of the first American ship to circumnavigate the globe in 1790. And as the name of the restaurant suggests, this place serves up seafood and has a nautical theme to it. If you don't like seafood, you may want to steer clear of this place, because the smell of fish can be overwhelming to some. But if you can get past that, this is a great place to eat, simply because there's a tremendous amount of seating in semi-private rooms. It's a great place for a break, and you get some interesting views of both Fantasyland and Liberty Square. In terms of practicals, this restaurant is open for lunch and dinner. However, hours vary, and it's not uncommon for dinner to stop a few hours before the park closes, so it's always best to check the times guide. In terms of food, seafood is of course the main ingredient here. Entrees include a lobster roll, grilled salmon, and various fish combos. And like many quick service restaurants at the Magic Kingdom, this place offers the mobile food ordering service, which I highly recommend you use because this place can get pretty busy. But perhaps the most underrated restaurant in Magic Kingdom is the Liberty Tree Tavern. This table service restaurant offers a Thanksgiving-style feast 365 days out of the year. I love the theming and the details of this restaurant. The Colonial Tavern has several rooms, and each one is appropriately themed to a different historical figure, from George and Martha Washington to Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin. Like Columbia Harbor House, each room is quaint and offers a relaxing escape from the crowds with some hearty food. Now, the restaurant is open for lunch and dinner, but menu offerings change. At lunch, you can have the option to order off of the a la carte menu or go for the all-you-can-eat option with the PATRIOT'S platter. Dinner is strictly the all-you-can-eat choice. The PATRIOT'S platter itself includes roasted turkey breast, pot roast, and pork. And it's served with all the trimmings, from mashed potatoes, stuffing, and seasonal vegetables. Entree prices at lunch range from $16 to $23, and the all-you-can-eat option is usually priced around $36 for adults and $23 for kids. One of my favorite things to do while visiting Liberty Square is to go shopping. This land features some of the Magic Kingdom's best stores, the first being the Ye Olde Christmas Shop. This is the Magic Kingdom's Christmas store, and it's open year-round, selling Disney-themed ornaments and holiday merchandise. One unique feature of this shop is that the ornaments can be personalized with your name and the year. The merchandise will sometimes rotate to feature items appropriately themed to whatever holiday is taking place when you visit. Therefore, during Halloween, there's some spooky items, and I've even seen some patriotic merchandise here around the 4th of July. But the Christmas stuff is always here, don't worry. And recently, the very last room began selling a few Muppets-themed merchandise as well, to coincide with the show that takes place outside, just across the way from the shop. But the best store in this land is Memento MORI. This store opened up just a few years ago to meet the high demand of Haunted Mansion-themed merchandise. Inside, you'll find a fantastic collection of figurines, clothing, and more, all inspired by the famous attraction. I think that both this store and the one located at the exit of the Tower of Terror are the best attraction-specific stores in all of Walt Disney World. If you're a Haunted Mansion fan, this is the one shop to visit to see the complete merchandise lineup. But a truly unique take-home souvenir here is one of the new Spirit photographs. For $19.95, you can have your photo taken and receive an 8x10 print of your spooky portrait. No other place in Disney World offers this unique photo opportunity, and it only takes a few minutes to do. And finally, we are now at the main attractions in Liberty Square. And before we get to everyone's favorite, let's start with a look at the Hall of Presidents. Like the Country Bear Jamboree over in Frontierland, this animatronic show is a Florida original. But unlike the Singing Bears, this attraction has never been replicated in any other Disney park in the world. But what I love most about the Hall of Presidents is not so much the history aspect, but Roy and the Imagineers' tribute to Walt himself. This show is really a plus-size version of Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. Disney fans know that Walt had a passion for American history, and the Abraham Lincoln Show, alongside the Carousel of Progress, was a major breakthrough in Disney Imagineering. Both Lincoln and the Carousel of Progress allowed Imagineers to develop the first human-based animatronics to be used in an attraction. But Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln specifically held a special place in Walt's heart. Back in the 1950s, Walt had envisioned an idea for an extension of Main Street, USA, that would be called Edison Square. And there would be a Liberty Street section that would house an attraction paying tribute to American presidents. But since technology was not ready for such a grand idea, the concept was shelved. But when Walt and the Imagineers developed animatronics more for the New York World's Fair, he came back to his presidential idea. And instead of recreating all the American presidents, he decided to focus on his favorite, Abe Lincoln. Thus, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln was born and part of the Illinois Pavilion at the 1964 fair, which later moved to Disneyland. When Walt died in the 1960s, his brother took over the company and carried out the idea of the Florida Project. And instead of a New Orleans square at Magic Kingdom, Roy and Imagineers decided on building Liberty Square to see through Walt's original idea for Liberty Street. And the Hall of Presidents is a fitting tribute to Walt's ambition and love for American history. On a practical side, the show is nearly 30 minutes long and runs continuously throughout the day. But it does tend to close a little earlier than the Magic Kingdom itself, so always check your times guide for the most up-to-date details. Now, just a few steps away from the Hall of Presidents is the Liberty Square Riverboat. This is one of those rare occasions when an attraction actually travels through two different lands. The Magic Kingdom used to have two riverboats sailing through the rivers of America, and they were each named the Admiral Joe Fowler and the Richard F. Irvine. The Admiral Joe Fowler was retired around 1980 when it suffered a terrible accident. And it was at that point that the Richard F. Irvine was renamed the Liberty Belle. The attraction offers some fantastic views of both Liberty Square and Frontierland, including some scenes towards the back of Tom Sawyer Island that can only be seen on the riverboat. Sadly, the Liberty Square riverboat has been out of commission for most of 2018. A lengthy refurbishment has been extended several times, and the boat is currently undergoing some major works. It is currently scheduled to return into service by the end of the year, if not early 2019. And now we're at the attraction you've all been waiting for, the Haunted Mansion. Like I said earlier, this is my favorite of all the classic Disney dark rides. And I think it's because there's not one solid linear storyline here, but rather a series of vignettes and different stories. Every time I ride this attraction, I spot something new and enjoy another element of the ride. But what makes the Florida version so special is the exterior. Magic Kingdom's version of the Haunted Mansion is a huge departure from the California counterpart. specifically when it comes to the exterior of the house itself. Because Magic Kingdom lacks New Orleans Square, an entirely different theme had to be built here. One that has roots in Gothic Revival architecture, specifically found in the northeast corner of America. It is said that the design of the mansion is loosely inspired by the Harry Packer Mansion that can be found in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, about 80 miles north of Philadelphia. It is specifically the middle tower of the mansion that draws resemblance to the Pennsylvania home. The real house was designed by Addison Hutton and built in 1874. The home now serves as an inn and hosts a murder mystery event as well. But Disney's version is much darker and spookier than the colorful Pennsylvania home. I've heard rumors that the designer of Disney's mansion had a fascination with the game of chess, hence the accents on the roof of the mansion that look like chess pieces. Some say that the only piece missing is the knight, and that's because it's always night inside the ride. But I don't know if any of that is really true. On a practical side, this is the only attraction in Liberty Square to offer FastPass Plus reservations. It is not a horrible use of a FastPass because this ride seems to get more popular every year. It is not uncommon to find the line pouring out of the entrance to the attraction and down the streets of Liberty Square. But I often do stand by for this ride, mainly because I enjoy the extended queue area. All of the set pieces here pay homage to Disney Imagineers or come from concept stories that were once conceived for the attraction. Think of this as a graveyard for all the characters that never made it to the final version of the ride. And the tombstones feature the actual names of Imagineers who worked on the attraction itself. Now, I could spend hours talking about the Haunted Mansion, but sadly, that will have to do it for today, because we're at the end of today's episode, exploring Liberty Square at the Magic Kingdom. I hope you enjoyed today's trip back in time to the birth of America, and with some spooky stories along the way. Next week, I'm going to take a small break from this series and return to a more practical topic when it comes to vacation planning, the Disney dining plan. I've touched on this topic before, but this next installment will specifically look at how the plan has changed since the last time I discussed it. Specifically, the addition of alcohol and snack credits. But until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it.